Thanks for tuning into the market wrap today. And you could probably say more of the same kind of trade that happened yesterday almost seemed to be an encore of sorts in today's session as well, with a number of stocks buckling down under pressure, more so Telecom. But let's quickly cut to the chase and talk about the names which did well and what the names that did not do well. So this is, of course, what the index did. And as I said, seemed like yesterday, but slightly different than yesterday is the fact that the index ended in the red. So that is the point that you have to bear in mind. BPCL about 3 percentage points higher. There is some gains in HCL Technologies. Actually, IT did reasonably okay for itself. And as you can see there, Reliance Industries, I don't know if this has got to do with the fact that there's a news report about how Facebook and Silver Lake might actually, or KKR might actually invest into Reliance Retail or what have you. I mean, that did well. What didn't do well, Infratel, for all the gains that it has made, it's corrected about 7 or 8% in the session today. And mind you, Idea too had a corrective move. Bharti Airtel was a big one, and we'll talk about that in detail. But that one over 3% too. And banks like Axis look slightly wobbly. The broader end of the spectrum too. We had a bunch of casualties today. I'm sure that the market read whether it looked as bad as yesterday is a separate thing altogether. It actually looked worse than yesterday. And as you can see today, the tilt of the selling was much higher. Yesterday, while the breadth was worse, the number of gainers and making double-digit gains was much higher than the number of losers. Today, it was a bit of an turnabout. So look at the losers. Bharat Dynamics on the OFS down about 14%. Vodafone Idea, AstraZeneca, yesterday's big gainer down about 7%. Some auto ancillaries like Jamna came off. PVR came off about 5.5. Indian hotels came out about 5.5. So a lot of these names had pressure points to themselves and very few gainers. So Dixon gained 7.5, standing tall at life highs. IndiaMart Intermesh 5% standing tall at life highs, and some gains for certain construction names. I wonder if Nickey has some idea about why Ashoka or Asadbha or KNR went up, but she tracks that closely, that space. Yeah, that pocket certainly looked very, very interesting. In fact, let's get Nickey in on this and talk about some of these names and some of the other names that she's highlighting for us. Nickey, good afternoon. First, let's talk about the names that you highlighted, and then was there any reason why maybe we'll talk about the pharma construction names, but first the names that went
Sure.
up all of the
Sure, I'm gonna be starting off with BPCL first because clearly that was the top gainer on Nifty today. Expression of interest for BPCL divestment has been extended to September 13th. So that's one bit of development which is pretty much keeping the traders active around the stock. A couple of days back, there are few actually brokerages reports which have come out on BPCL, but which one is interesting is in one which is on MK Global, which says that it's a fine wine in a new bottle, where they've suggested that any operational autonomy which comes to the PSU asset will actually just increase the productivity overall for the company as a whole. It said that the revenue is expected to enhance, the outright rationalization strategies would be at play, and also that will lead to optimization of operational performance. So clearly a very positive undertone coming in for BPCL, on account of which you're seeing this counter pretty much active in trade. The other bit is, of course, Nifty IT stocks. Now they've been in traction for the last two consecutive sessions, and Wipro and HCL Technologies both have been doing extremely well. Three of brokerages, foreign brokerages actually have initiated a buy rating on the sector, which suggested that there's a decent demand outlook coming in. City today initiated, came out with a report suggesting their top picks were Tech Mahindra, Infosys, and HCL. Suggested that they see a pent-up demand benefit coming in for FY22 for the sector overall, and have said that they see a high single-digit revenue growth for large cap at least for FY22. On account of that, you've seen some amount of traction coming in on the IT sector. Apart from that, of course, there have been, this entire bit around RIL, as you just mentioned, that it started a preliminary discussion with at least Business Standard report in the morning suggested that the company is in talks with Facebook and private equity fund KKR, which have already invested some amount of stake in the RIL run Geo, and now probably could be making an investment in its retail business. So pretty much some amount of activity on that. But then I'm going to come back to you, Niraj, because Bharti Airtel apparently Nifty has fallen below the 200 days, DMA, and that's probably the lowest that we have since March. Any reasons for that?
Yeah, I think it's all telcos came off today, save for Reliance. Now, I don't know if this is a bit of an unwinding trade or otherwise, but some serious pullbacks. On the AGR verdict day, Bharti Airtel went up all the way to 550. From there, it's been a one-way move down all the way to 498. Very interesting. We tried to get some technical quotes out here because it broke some key moving averages. And I think Chandan Paparia said the immediate support is at 480. Um, because it has broken some key support levels at 507, 506. So it does look very, very wobbly. But curiously, Idea 2 went off. I don't know if it's got to do with the fact that there is a bit of battle going on the broadband rates between Jio and Airtel, and that might be putting pressure. But that's not a very large part of the business either, Nickey. So I mean, depends. Remains to be seen why this is happening and how it's moving. But just one very quick question, Nickey, off the cuff. Um, anything that happened in the construction names because of which they were all up and about, or was it without
See,
any
the NHI
specific fundamental
momentum has
reason?
incredibly has been picking up, as we all know that the execution rates have been picking up. If you look at the execution of all the projects, they're at 80-90% of the pre-COVID levels. You're seeing bunch of orders being announced of lately, and then of course there is some relaxation of payments coming in from government. All of them is actually auguring well for the space overall right now. If you look at the valuation, it's there is a support out there. The balance sheet at this point of time, there is some sort of comfort coming in. As compared to the previous cycles that you have a debt to equity ratio of around 0.7 times for aggregate level on the entire sector, which was roughly around 1.5 back in FY14. So some amount of comfort coming in on that account as well. So clearly, it's the momentum which NHI is going around with, be it in terms of construction or in terms of awarding. It's clearly auguring well for the space.
Thanks, Nikki, for that. Well, all of those names were certainly in focus, but I think the bigger worry for markets today would be, or the bigger monitoring point for markets today would be that the US markets kickstart trade after that long weekend, and the futures, at least in the morning, were not suggesting a pretty sight. So, if indeed the US markets come off a bit in the session today, then that adds to further pressure. But remember, the world markets otherwise have not done all that poorly. As we speak, Europe marginally lower, if you will. CAC is down about 1%, but FTSE is just flattish in trade. Euro stocks down 1%, but remember it had gained about 1% and a half yesterday. So let's wait and watch. We'll probably get to know what happens to our markets based on what the US markets do today. So we'll wait for those cues. But Nickey, thanks so much for joining in, and viewers, thanks for tuning in to this market wrap.